I love this song, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Talks about a fantasy. I got a fantasy. I want to talk to you about it in this segment. What is that fantasy? Is that poultry will not be administered human antibiotics. Why? There's a lot of reasons. We're going to talk about it. One, make you sick and kill you if you're susceptible to it. But two, it's an industry practice that saves them money. Let's talk about it. Look on that slide on the left. If you've ever been in a poultry growth house, and the Central Valley of California is loaded full of them, just about the whole United States, because when you go to a restaurant, you go to a dinner, they're going to ask you want the fish plate, you want the chicken, or do you want the beef, or you want the pork, or are you a vegetarian? All right, so here's the deal. If you've ever been in one of those houses, it's loud, hot, disgusting. Why? Because those animals are kept in horrible conditions. Yes, they have water. Yes, they have food. A lot of food includes their own brothers and sisters. But what are they eventually going to be converted into? A food product. You see on the right-hand side, when you go to the grocery store, hopefully this segment will teach you about how to select food which has not been injected with human antibiotics. Next slide. We're talking about here is a multi-drug-resistant Salmonella, the subspecies of which is Heidelberg. What does that mean? Look on the far left, you'll see a picture of a scanning electron pictograph. On the right, you see a microbiologist looking at a culture plate and interpreting. That's actually a coloremic media because it turns a certain color when certain organisms flourish in that media or that compound of food and in a high volume temperature. It's usually 2 days. Let's talk about the facts. The facts are in 2014, 524 people from 25 states were infected with 7 outbreak strains of Salmonella. Now, Heidelberg comes in various strains. There are about 3,000 subspecies of Salmonella. But since 2013 it has been an issue. You might say, hey, I'm strong and robust. What about little children that live in your home? What about older people that have a reduced ability to fight off these organisms? What we're talking about is an outbreak of harming people because of industry practices. Businesses do things based on money. Next slide. These are the risky populations for Salmonella. If you've ever handled a turtle or a frog, as you see on the left, those animals quite often require you to wash your hands afterward and get underneath those fingernails because those organisms will be transmitted, particularly to children, and brought into the house. Children, the elderly, individuals with compromised immune systems, we call those immunocompromised, are at high risk, and they may go to the hospital. You see that little child on the bottom left? Here are the symptoms they'll experience, which I don't think you want your children or anybody else you know to be vomiting, diarrhea. That diarrhea will usually have blood, and that's because in your upper and lower GI, these organisms just multiply like crazy. It's nice and warm in there. There's plenty of food for them. They'll have a fever. They'll have cramps. Some survive, some don't. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about Salmonella, yes, from industrial sources, chicken, and yes, from animals out in the wild. Next slide. Let's talk about poultry just for a second. This is the focus of this segment right here. It's not a fantasy. This is what the companies do to save money. They take the chicks and inject them. It's called best practices. That's a horrible use of the word. It's called husbandry because you have humans taking care of animals. And then they use vaccinations. It makes it sound very helpful to the animal. But it saves the industry money because fewer of those chicks die and then they can send out more for food. Vaccination of poultry, I'm reading this little graphic here, against salmonella infections helps to achieve salmonella-free poultry and meat and eggs. That's why every egg is checked and it's safe for human consumption. That's very nice to hear. The challenge is that vaccination and all those chemicals that go in there, and it's a highly complex process to grow. They're actually putting salmonella into the chicks and letting their own immune system fight it off if they can. If they don't, they die. Next slide. Well, poultry companies, who are they? These are some large ones here, if it's in your area. Foster Farms. They're California's biggest producer, and they were cited with an outbreak. They plan on stopping it in 2015, which is, by the way, this year. As you look at these products, they look great, wrapped in plastic, sitting at the grocery store. Purdue Foods says it hasn't used antibiotics for growth promotion. And what they mean by growth promotion, they want a bigger bird to grow faster so they can sell it better. And it doesn't use any human antibiotics in its feed. Well, that's good. So they can still inject them. Tyson Foods, which is a huge company, they say they don't use antibiotics at all for their poultry. Those are encouraging. You see the mix. I've given my food safety presentations to hospital boards, food production boards, and they basically come down on 2 points. A, it's too expensive. Hey, Andy, we're going to do it the way my granddaddy did it. C, Andy, we have insurance for that. And D, we're following the government regs. And, you know, we're really tired of hearing about all these hippies coming in here asking for more regulation and more precaution. Well, I'm not a hippie. I'm a food safety scientist. And I'll say that whoever buys a poultry that doesn't look and inspect, you're taking your risk that they've been using it. Next slide. All right. Some countries don't agree with American production practices, believe it or not. Apples were restricted from the East. That's Japan and China. Why? Because they found listeria, and our practices actually enhance listeria growth. Poultry. We're looking at particularly China. China imposed a ban on the import of poultry based on these practices. One of the particular organisms of interest was the bird flu. We all hear about H1N1, but the bird flu, H5N8, is also influenza. Here's what they don't want. They don't want that product here in the United States. And we might think, oh, we have the best food in the world, and some things we don't take from China. Well, that's one thing you've got to keep an eye on. Where are these products being banned from? And a lot of times in our media here in the United States, we don't hear anything about it. The only thing we hear are advertisements. Oh, poultry from Purdue is awesome. Just cook it. Or poultry from Tyson's is awesome. If you just believe propaganda, then you'll become a victim. Next slide. Here's what I grant to you. Power. Consumers have power not to buy. You thank all your lucky stars, thank your political system that we grew up here in the United States. We don't have to buy anything unless we want to. What we see on the far left is a product from Foster Farms that says it's $3 off. You have to ask yourself why. It says American Humane Association certified. Interesting. What does that mean? You see a lot of stickers on these food products, and you have no clue what it means, but it sounds good. Also, on the right-hand side, you don't see any stickers. What does that mean? It means it obviously wasn't on sale, and it also means that the American, Humane Association certified? It doesn't have that sticker. Learn to become a powerful consumer by opening your eyes. 389 people were infected, and 40% of them were hospitalized in 2014 from this form of salmonella, from this particular vendor. And you know what? None of the plants were closed. Only 3 of them had some modified sanitation protocols. Next slide. Here are my suggestions to you. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I believe in it. Number 1, buy poultry which has been labeled as free from human antibiotics. You say, Andy, how am I going to do that? Open your eyes. Look for it. There on the far left, you will see a package of poultry which is labeled antibiotic-free. It has a star there. You probably want to read a little bit more on that. But that's meaning you as a consumer have picked that one and you haven't picked the others. You haven't picked the manager special. You haven't picked the one that's not labeled. You're picking one that's specifically on this issue, antibiotics-free. Next, handle all poultry as if it's contaminated. You look on the left, on the bottom. It says no hormones or steroids added. Why would a food producer growing animals want to give them hormones or steroids? The same thing that I did when I was training for the Olympics. I wanted to be bigger, faster, and stronger. And I wanted to grow bigger, faster. That's the same reason. Yes, it added water. That's why they call it antibiotic steroids. Did it make me strong? Yes, for a while, and then I got weaker when I got off of them. But they're only injecting those for a certain time. So treat all poultry as if it's infected with salmonella. What is that? How do you do that? So you thoroughly cook it, boil it, and prepare it. Don't serve any raw poultry to anybody around you. Don't let them eat it. Test the temperature for safety. Remember, we talked about 165 degrees for poultry. Invest in a temperature monitor, a probe. I bought it, it's $10. Be on the alert for cross-contamination. What does that mean? If you're preparing your chicken here, and you've already got it in a pot, already got it prepared over the grill, completely wipe that off, preferably with a chlorine-type cleaner, Clorox with a little bit of water. Spray that off, rinse it, then bring over your other items like chopping up vegetables, getting ready a salad. Bottom line for you and me in this last minute, open your eyes. It's a fantasy to believe that all food coming from these or any other food producer has been pre-tested and tested for any human pathogens like Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli. Take your life in your own hands. I'd like to thank you for your help today to become an active consumer. Know that when you make a selection, there's going to be a product manager from Tyson's. There's going to be a product manager from Purdue or for Foster Farms noting that you didn't buy their product they just made as cheaply, as fast as possible. Thank you very much. I look forward to the next segment.